I think we're on. Here we go. Good evening, everybody. Good evening, everyone. Thomas Hampson here. Welcome to Idagio Live, the place where classical music happens. I love all those adjectives and verbs and implications that music isn't just this passive thing, but that something's happening around music. The idea behind Idagio Live is that we have some interaction with you, or more importantly, you, our wonderful public and listening public, have interaction with us, who you listen to quite often, and the things that we make audible for all of us. Now, I have a question for you. When you heard that music, whether you've heard it or not, what came into your mind? What did you think about? Did it just sound like a call or a kind of music you've heard before? Could have been. Did it make you think something was in the distance? Did it make you think something was about to happen? I cut you off before we could go on. Or was it just a pretty melody? These are the things that song does. And that's the whole point of a song. It's to explode in your mind. Today, we're going to talk about song. In fact, every week, I'm going to talk about song, probably mostly on Tuesdays. And I'm going to invite colleagues that also have devoted their lives to song to drop by and share their experiences and their ideas about why song is so important. And I think that's going to be quite fun. This is, of course, a beta project, and you're live, you're in my office, and welcome home. I've got a few things I'm going to try technically that I hope work. But the whole point is that we can share a moment of song. Of course, you know how passionate I am about song. What is song? What is classic song? Classic song is literally that wonderful art form of two art forms, music and poetry, forming together a third and unique art form. It's really quite a special experience. And since poetry is essentially there to explode our imaginations, and music is probably there mostly to ignite our emotions, we have this perfect Pascal equation of heart and mind, which is quite fascinating, I think. But more importantly, if you start looking down through the layers of a song, it's hard not to recognize times that they come from, times the music come from, times that the poet comes from, all illuminating an eternal life. There's layers to every song that we have to deal with as artists, but most importantly, that we make audible for you, the public, to create your own journey. And yes, here we are, one of my favorite words, journey or wandering. The idea that we take things to ourselves that mean something to ourselves, that reinforce the idea that there is meaning in life. I love Joseph Campbell, the great philosopher. And after all these years and all this wonderful anthropological, philosophical work, someone asked him, what is the essence, do you think, of your work? And he said, I would like to have people relax the idea of finding the meaning of life and concentrate in finding the meaning in life. And I think there's fewer art forms that do that better for us in those layers, in a kind of diary of who we are, who we have been. And maybe if we pay attention, we can actually have a bit more security and stability moving into the future. That would be nice. There's an awful lot of narrative. There's an awful lot of storytelling going on. If it's not real and come from the heart, then it probably won't happen. We're going to talk about Schubert tonight. We're going to talk about Mahler tonight, which is great fun. I already told you, next Tuesday, I'm going to have a wonderful guest. The pianist Malcolm Martineau is going to come by. And we're going to discuss the two sides of pianist and singer and the wonderful world of song that we're always exploring in various languages. Song as a as a diary. This is actually quite interesting. You know, there was a very famous politician just after Lincoln's death. Well, he was alive when Lincoln died, but nevertheless, he became very important after Lincoln's death. In fact, he was one of the forming parties of Lincoln's party at that time. I won't say the name of it because it's not the same party. His name was Henry Clay, and he was known as the great compromiser. And that, in a sense, a good sense, someone who found the way to empathize with another person's opinions or ideas or philosophy or life, and find some sort of, if not compromise, détente that is so important. And he had a quote that actually sits on posters around schools in America. He says, "If you want to know another culture, know their songs." I've taken great refuge in that idea. The different languages and the different epochs that we deal with, those are like prisms through which we look at different aspects of simply people being people. And that will never change. That is timeless. The window we look through is sometimes quite different, and that can also be quite interesting, but it's always about people. Let's look at Schubert. Schubert is this amazing story, human being, very short life, 1797 to 1828. Can you imagine that in that short of time, he wrote over 625 songs? I'm not actually, I think the exact number, 631 or 639 or 600 songs. And how many, 9 symphonies, how many operas, how many chamber music pieces? Amazing. But in his songs, what is so, not just the number of songs, what is so profoundly moving to me in his songs, excuse me, we've had this pollen dump where I live, and my allergies are having fun. So excuse me if I clear my throat a little bit too much, but it'll get better. Schubert was endlessly fascinated with how different poets from different schools of thought found a way, or needed to find a way, to say what it was like to be alive at that time. And what's remarkable about Schubert is how he found so many, not just so many, he found the musical voice to actually bring out the essence of that poem. And furthermore, he was the first one, and this is what really kind of took everybody's breath away with songs like Erlkönig and Gretchen am Spinnrad. He was the first one to really try and create an external world in the music. Rustling of leaves, babbling of brooks, galloping of horses, wagons, even what we're going to now hear, the clumping of forest bed paths while a rather distraught person asks inanimate moon how to live a better life. This is a very romantic imagery, but the Romantics believed that there was a kind of correspondence, a mitigation between some of the dark sides of human nature and the clarity of nature itself. Now, mind you, all of this is projections from humans, and the moon and the stars and the trees and the birds and the rustling this and that don't really care. They're just doing that. We're projecting all of that, but that's kind of the miracle of poetry and song. Let's have a listen to one of the most famous songs that Schubert wrote, one of his many wandering songs, and this is Der Wanderer an dem Mond. And the poem is by Johann Gabriel Seidl, very popular poet, very, very famous for his humor and rather sentimental poetry. But it isn't, this poem just captures the essence of our shadowy existence, looking for the clarity in the night. Let me just, now, here we go. This is going to be one of the bells and whistles. We're going to listen to that, but let me take you first through how you do this. I'm going to do screen sharing, and the next thing you're going to see is the Idagio website, or in fact, in this case, it's the app. Now, you can see me moving around here. This is just the splash page. It's called Discover, Michael Tilson Thomas's new record. I don't know if you had a chance to listen to him last Friday. He gave a wonderful talk about his life and all the people he knew, including Stravinsky. Now, if you're looking for a song, you would type it up here. And as you can see, I've already done that. So if I just touch that, now this is where Idagio gets really fun. Look at this. I've looked for that song and look at all the variations. It's giving me in the catalog all the various performances right up front of the different performances of that song. Now, if I just click on it, I'll listen to it, that's fine. Or I can go over here, and this is what I wanted to show you tonight. This is the bells and whistles of the app that I'd like to share because I think it's really wonderful. And that is, you just jump on this, you can add to a playlist. You can see I have 3 already here, or I can create one. I'm not going to create one, but you could just create one. I created one this afternoon called Songs for Idagio Friends. So I'm going to go out of here. I already have that. And what you can do, for instance, with that, you have a playlist. So anything you're listening to, you can click. There's always this somewhere in the recording you're listening to, and you can see, and it'll take you right there, and you can add it to your playlist. You can make a playlist as my songs I want to listen to this week, or Schubert songs I never knew, or songs maybe you've never thought about listening to before, or maybe you want to have songs and orchestra pieces and something else. It doesn't matter. Make your own playlist, right? And then if you go over here to your playlist and tap on that, and you go to Songs for Idagio Friends, you'll see that my 3 songs that I chose, and the first one is our Der Wanderer an den Mond. And that's what I'd like to play, the first couple of verses of the wonderful Herman, one of the greatest lead singers of the late 20th century ever to be, singing, and Karl Engel on the piano.
Ich auf der Erd am Himmel, du, wir wandern beide, rüst dich zu. Ich ernst und trübe, du mild und rein, was mag der Unterschied wohl sein? Ich wandre fremd von Land zu Land, so heimatlos, so unbekannt. Bergauf, bergab, Wald ein, Wald aus, doch bin ich nirgendacht zu Haus.
I'm sorry to do that to you. Isn't that a wonderful recording? That's just a wonderful, I know, you can feel the movement. What's very interesting, of course, if you stayed in the app, you could hear different people's interpretations, and that's where it gets. I think it's probably written mäßig or nicht zu schnell or something. I'm not exactly sure. Sometimes I'll get better at the screen sharing and I can show you some music, which would be fun. Maybe we can find the manuscript online. That would be fun, and see the emotion with which Schubert wrote his songs, which is incredibly interesting. But you can hear, and I think what is the essence of this poem, which is so important. And let me just read you what you just heard. I on earth, you in heaven, both of us moving sturdily on, I sad and cheerless, you so gentle and clear. What can the difference really be? I go as a stranger from one region to another, so homeless and unknown, uphill, downhill, in and out of the forests, but nowhere do I make my home. But you traverse up and down from your cradle in the west to your grave in the east, sail in and out of every land, and yet you are at home wherever you are. The heavens endlessly outstretched are your beloved native land. Happy is he who, wherever he goes, stands ever on his native soil. I mean, that is just a wonderful, feel good, never be alone song if I ever heard one. And I didn't pick it necessarily because we're in this crisis. I picked it because it's just a wonderful song that I think everyone gets and everyone feels better having experienced it. It is obviously what I described as the romantic imagery. It's relatively late in Schubert's oeuvre. It's 1826, and we already hear, if you know Schubert's Lieder very much, and if you know the Winterreise, you can already hear the Gute Nacht, the first long, beautiful narrative and farewell of the first song of the Winterreise. Schubert's magic of without hesitation or bump changing from major to minor mode, which even if you're not a musician, you know something's happening. You feel that sort of, it was just getting dark and it was about to look at the moon and it goes, major. So go back and have a listen. If you do feel like listening to other colleagues, which is perfectly fine, you'll find that everybody has a different idea of what tempo could mean. I find tempo, for my essential choices in music and especially in song, an indication of the heartbeat of the person at that time that they're singing something. I think the heartbeat of Der Wanderer, I'm not sure whether it's as the moon's rising or if he hasn't been able to sleep all night and he's having a good walk in the morning as the moon's going away and the sun's coming. I don't really know. But those are the things we get to decide when we sing. Has it just rained? Is it fall? Is it spring? Is it winter? Has he got a coat on? Does he have to go somewhere? Is he actually moving at all, or he just wishes he could? These are all things. There's no right or wrong answer, but there is an answer because it's a story that has to be told. And that's what I really enjoy working with my young colleagues in Heidelberg at the Lied Academy in Heidelberg Frühling, or the Boulez Saal at the Barenboim Said Academy in the Schubert Woche in January. Wherever I work with young people about songs, and I love to have our public there online or physically so we can examine how elemental poetry and music can actually be to not just enriching our lives, but giving direction to our lives. The idea that the arts are somehow elitist or elective is just a completely false notion and description of what the arts do. The classical music is one of the greatest evidences of the bursting of the individual of the beginning of the 19th century. But probably talk about that some other time. I don't want to get too far down too many tributaries. I want to stay focused. We're going to do screen sharing again. And I'm going to go back to the Idagio. Here we are. So I turned that off. I was in my playlist. Now, you could go back here and we could write in zu Straßburg and see what comes up. Kinsel comes up. Here's Gustav Mahler, right? Funny that it comes up with that one. All right. I'm looking for zu Straßburg auf der Schanz von Gustav Mahler, but I know that I recorded it. So in fact, you could do that too. You could get rid of this and you could just have some fun and look up your singer of choice that day. And looky here, you're going to get this and come along. This is going to be a huge list. And what I love at Idagio, look at all these cross references of composers that I've involved in, instruments that might have something to do with what I recorded. These are the albums that I've been participating in, the ensembles with which some of these recorded, Concertus Musicus and my beloved Nicholas Harnoncourt at the top, of course, with 30 different tracks, right? Different composers, different conductors, different other soloists that have joined me. It's great fun. So anyway, I scrolled down here and I found the recording I was looking for, and I did that wonderful thing and put it in my playlist. So I'm going to go back to the playlist here, and we have the Mahler song. But before we listen to that, let's just talk briefly about, well, I guess Gustav Mahler. Why not? Gustav Mahler and Schubert are extremely close friends spiritually at the very least. Mahler in so many ways just took the development of musical language to another level. This particular poem is from Des Kadam and Wunderhorn, which always makes me feel very warm and cozy in the spring when I'm in Heidelberg, because that's where the original pages and volumes of this wonderful collection of folk poetry that was poetry over many, many decades, if not hundreds of years, collected by Achim von Arnim and Clemens von Brentano, and in which they took various versions of various poems and made their own poem, as it were. And it's quite interesting to look at the original and then what they made out of a poem. And because Mahler was so literarily devoted and interested, he in fact felt very compelled and passionate about sometimes taking and forming his own words out of those words to fit the song that he was trying to write. He called that process, he described that process as like a sculptor chiseling on a piece of granite or marble. I think that's a wonderful image to have in your mind. But Mahler truly, in all of his songs, is creating sort of a cosmos in each song. And they all have a narrative in there. They all have a story very much linked to the times that they were written, very much linked to particular characters that a lot of them are victims of fate, victims of the society with which they are part of. A lot of them are young men that have been conscripted into military compulsory service for a government they may or may not like. In fact, at that time, probably that wasn't even a question they were allowed to ask. So you get the question of a deserter, and what Mahler likes to throw up the question is, you know, is a 16-year-old boy standing on the banks of the Rhine looking at his homeland and hearing the Alp horn, is he a deserter? Is he just a lonely lad that'd like to go home and be with mom and have a good meal and get on with what he would consider the important things of life? These are wonderful questions that get thrown up in Mahler's songs. I remember there was a conversation once somebody asked Leonard Bernstein, gee, isn't it too bad that Mahler never wrote an opera? And Lenny, without even blinking an eye, said, no, that's not true. He wrote 50 of them. I love that. He wrote 50 songs, dear Mr. Mahler. And they are all like miniature scenes. This is a relatively early song. He thought about orchestrating it. It is the last song he wrote before he started the Des Canne Wunderhorn songs that he did then orchestrate, quite a row of them through the 1890s. There are some sketches of different instruments he had in mind. That first theme, he had in an English horn. Had a lot of, then the drums come in. Boom. Now, when we play this song, and I'm going to leave you to it pretty soon. And when you play the song, we'll listen to a little bit, because listen to the first refrain when the boy starts singing, and he actually, Mahler cleverly takes and turns the melody of the Marseillaise around. Now, in the first version of this poem, the poem is called Der Schweizer, which is very apropos since I'm speaking to you from Zurich. So you get this lad, nationality, probably Schweiz, maybe origin French, maybe caught in Germany, certainly standing on the Schanz, either looking back at Straßburg or in Straßburg looking across the Rhine to the homeland, which would probably be the Schweiz at that corner piece where all the countries come together. Whatever that is, I think you hear the loneliness of this lad. Let's have a listen. We're going to do Back to Share, and I'll go back to my Idagio app, which I really encourage you to explore. And by the way, if you have your Idagio app on your iPhone or your iPad, or even on your Sonos on a television, this playlist travels with it. So if you set up a playlist at your desk in your browser or this desktop app or whatever, and then you take your telephone with you and you're somewhere else and you open your Idagio app and you go to your playlists, you're going to have this playlist and these songs, which I think is kind of wonderful. So I'm going to go into playlists, and we're going to go to the tracks for Idagio Friends, and we're going to have a listen to the first part of Zu Straßburg auf der Schanz with me, Thomas Hampson, and Geoffrey Parsons, one of the great Geoffrey Parsons, who died way too young in 1995. He was a wonderful gentleman. I learned a great deal from him. He was given to me by Elizabeth Schwarzkopf back in the day, so it means quite a bit.
Straßburg auf der Schanz, da ging mein Trauern an. Das Alphorn hört ich drüben wohl anstimmen.
Hear it?
Ins Vaterland musst ich hinüberschwimmen,
Is that not marvelous? I find that just so genius from Mahler. Now, I'm purposely only playing the beginning of these songs because I want you to go to the links that are on this page. I want you to listen to these songs, and more importantly, I want you to go to the Idagio app, and I want either any of these songs to be, as we say, the beginning of the rabbit hole, to quote Alice in Wonderland, heading into a place where you don't know where you're going to come out, and the journey isn't quite sure, but there's a whole bunch of songs waiting for you in there. These are two wonderful songs. I hope this has been a good time. Every week we'll have a different sort of kaleidoscopic look at song, mostly classic song, but we're gonna take this idea of song and travel pretty wide and far. Folk song, perhaps some popular song, certainly some old song. Song is song. Do you know that song spelled backwards is Gnos, which is wisdom in Greek? I like that. So, on that parting idea, have a wonderful rest of your week. I will see you Tuesday at 7 o'clock Central Eastern Time with Malcolm Martineau, and we'll talk about some more songs. All the best.